The sun was shining brightly, casting a warm glow over the beautiful chapel. Inside, guests were taking their seats, whispering excitedly as they waited for the bride to walk down the aisle. The flowers had been arranged perfectly, and the soft music playing in the background only added to the romantic atmosphere. Everything seemed perfect, just like a fairy tale. This was the day everyone had been waiting for. It was the wedding of the year, the union of two souls that seemed destined to be together. The groom stood at the altar, his hands shaking slightly as he adjusted his tie. He was dressed in a sharp black suit, looking every bit the charming man he had always been. His friends and family smiled at him from the seats, proud of the life he was about to begin with his bride. The groom's name was Daniel. He had always been the center of attention, a man who seemed to have it all. He was successful, charming, and good-looking. It was hard to imagine anyone who didn't like him. For years, he had been the talk of the town, always surrounded by friends and admirers. Today, he was marrying the love of his life, the woman who made him feel complete. Or so it seemed. As the guests settled into their seats, the doors at the back of the chapel opened, and everyone turned their heads toward the bride. A hush fell over the room. The bride, Lily, stepped inside, her white dress sparkling in the sunlight that streamed through the tall windows. She looked like an angel, glowing with happiness. Her heart raced with excitement as she began her walk toward Daniel. Lily had always dreamed of this day. She had imagined it countless times in her mind, the moment when she would marry the man she loved more than anything. Daniel had always been her rock, the one person she could count on no matter what. The two had been together for years, and their love story had been nothing short of magical. To Lily, this was the beginning of forever. As she walked down the aisle, she caught glimpses of Daniel. His eyes were locked on hers, filled with love and admiration. She couldn't help but smile, her heart overflowing with joy. This was the moment she had waited for, the moment that would change her life forever. She felt like the luckiest woman in the world. The guests watched in awe as Lily made her way toward the altar. Some of them wiped away a tear, while others smiled at the beautiful sight. It was clear that everyone was caught up in the magic of the moment. It was a wedding that would be remembered for years to come. But amidst all the joy and excitement, one person was not so sure. A young boy, no older than 10, was sitting in the front row, his eyes focused intently on the groom. His name was Jake, and he was the bride's nephew. He had always been a quiet child, one who preferred to keep to himself. But today, something seemed off. As Lily reached the altar, she smiled at Daniel and placed her hand in his. The two exchanged loving glances, as if the world around them had faded away. They were about to make vows that would bind them together for life. This was the moment they had both dreamed of. But as the officiant began to speak, Jake's expression darkened. His hands, which had been resting in his lap, clenched into fists. His eyes narrowed, and he looked from Daniel to Lily, as if something wasn't quite right. He had been quiet for most of the ceremony, but now he seemed on edge. Something inside him was telling him that there was more to this story than what everyone else could see. Jake couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He didn't know why, but he felt an overwhelming sense of unease. His heart raced and his stomach churned. He knew he had to do something, but what? He glanced up at the altar, where Daniel was still smiling at Lily. There was no way of knowing what was going on behind Daniel's perfect smile, but Jake had an unsettling feeling that the truth was not what it seemed. As the officiant continued, Jake's thoughts were interrupted by a sudden urge to speak. Without thinking, he stood up, his small frame causing a few guests to turn their heads. His voice, clear and loud, broke through the calm silence of the room. "Don't marry him," Jake shouted, his voice shaking with emotion. "He's hiding something. He's not who you think he is." A gasp swept through the room. Guests turned to look at the boy, confusion written on their faces. The bride's smile faltered, and she turned to look at Jake, her expression a mix of surprise and concern. Daniel's face, once filled with joy, froze. His eyes widened, and he glanced at Jake, his hands clenched at his sides. The room was silent. The words from Jake's lips hung in the air like a heavy fog. Lily, standing at the altar, could hardly believe what had just happened. Her hand, which had been resting in Daniel's, began to tremble. She glanced at the boy, still standing at the front, his face serious, his eyes wide with something that seemed like both fear and determination. Daniel's smile faltered, just for a second, but it was enough to raise suspicion. The guests shifted in their seats, uneasy, unsure of what to make of the sudden outburst. Everyone was staring at the boy, waiting for him to explain. Jake's eyes locked onto Daniel. The young boy's face was pale, but there was a strength in his gaze that wasn't typical of someone his age. He stepped forward, his small voice echoing in the stillness of the chapel. "You're not who you say you are," he said again, louder this time. Lily's heart skipped a beat. The words struck her like a cold wind. What was happening? She looked at Daniel, searching his face for any sign that he might know why Jake was acting this way. Daniel, however, looked taken aback, his brow furrowed in confusion. His posture straightened as he tried to regain control of the situation. "Jake, what are you talking about?" Daniel asked, his voice shaky, though he tried to sound calm. He cleared his throat, still holding Lily's hand. "This isn't the time for games." But Jake didn't back down. "You have a secret. You've been hiding something, and you're lying to her," he said, his voice firm, though his hands were clenched tightly at his sides. Lily's eyes flicked between Jake and Daniel. A wave of confusion and anxiety washed over her. Daniel's reaction seemed too nervous, too defensive. The groom, who had been so sure of himself moments ago, now looked as though he was caught off guard by the boy's accusations. "Enough, Jake," Lily said softly, but there was an edge of uncertainty in her voice. She couldn't believe it. She had always trusted Daniel. She had always believed in him. What was this about? Why was the boy saying these things? Jake didn't listen. He took a step closer, locking eyes with the groom. "You don't know me, but I know you," Jake said, his voice shaking a little but full of determination. "I know your past. The real one. The one you've been hiding." Daniel's face went pale, and for the first time, Lily saw a flicker of fear in his eyes. His mouth opened and closed as if he was struggling to find words. The atmosphere in the chapel was thick with tension. The guests exchanged uneasy glances, unsure of how to respond. They were watching a wedding unravel before their eyes. But why? What was happening? Lily's heart was racing. She squeezed Daniel's hand, hoping he would say something, anything, to explain. "Daniel, what is he talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. Daniel swallowed hard. He stepped forward, trying to mask his nervousness. "Lily, please," he said, his voice softer now. "This is a misunderstanding. Jake doesn't know what he's saying. I've told you everything." But Lily's mind was racing. Was this really a misunderstanding? She had known Daniel for years. She had never once suspected anything out of the ordinary. He had always been the perfect partner, the man she thought she would spend the rest of her life with. What was happening now? Why was Jake making such serious accusations? The boy's face was filled with certainty. "You're lying. I know the truth about you. You can't hide it anymore." Jake took a deep breath. "I know about your past, about the things you did before you came here." Lily's heart stopped. Her mind couldn't comprehend what Jake was saying. Her eyes moved between the boy and Daniel, desperately trying to understand what was going on. Daniel had never mentioned any dark past. He had always been open with her, or so she had thought. But now, Jake was revealing something entirely different, something that made Lily's stomach twist. The guests were all watching in silence, their eyes fixed on the boy, waiting for him to say more. What was Jake talking about? And why did he seem so sure of it? Jake didn't give up. "I know you, Daniel. You think you can hide your past, but you can't. I know about the things you did before you moved here. The people you hurt. The lies you told. His voice broke slightly as he spoke, but there was no mistaking the pain and anger in his words. Daniel's face turned a shade paler. He took a step back, looking around at the guests. Some of them were now standing, murmuring among themselves. The tension was unbearable. What had Jake uncovered? What was this dark secret? Lily's breath caught in her throat. "Daniel," she whispered, her voice trembling. "What is he talking about? Please, just tell me." The groom stood frozen, his eyes darting from Jake to the guests to Lily. He didn't know what to say. His past was now exposed, and he couldn't deny it. The secret that he had buried deep inside for years was no longer hidden. His face twisted with regret, but he remained silent. Lily's mind was racing. She had to know the truth. "Daniel, tell me, what is this about?" she demanded, her voice shaking with a mixture of fear and disbelief. She didn't know what to believe anymore. Had everything been a lie? Just then, the officiant spoke up, trying to regain control of the situation. "Everyone, please, let's calm down," he said, his voice trembling with uncertainty. But it was clear that this wedding was no longer about vows or promises. Something had changed. Something deep and unsettling had been revealed. The guests sat still, waiting, unsure of what would happen next. Would Daniel admit the truth, or would he try to cover it up? The room was filled with suspense. The wedding, once filled with joy and excitement, had turned into something far darker. And Lily? She stood at the altar, her heart breaking, as she realized that everything she thought she knew about the man she was about to marry was now in question. Would she still marry him, or would she walk away, as the boy had warned her to do? The truth, it seemed, was more complicated than anyone had imagined. "You said." Lily stood at the altar, her heart racing as the words echoed in her mind. She had always known Daniel to be kind, loving, and trustworthy. So why did everything feel so wrong now? The weight of Jake's accusations pressed heavily on her chest. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think clearly. She looked at Daniel, but his face told her nothing. His eyes were filled with confusion and uncertainty, but there was no guilt. He was trying to remain calm, but Lily could see it in his posture, his shoulders stiff, his hands shaking slightly. The guests were still silent, their eyes darting between the boy and the groom. It seemed like time had slowed down. The wedding ceremony had completely fallen apart. No one knew what to do. No one knew how to make sense of the situation. They all just waited, hoping that somehow everything would be explained. But for Lily, nothing was making sense. She took a step back from Daniel, her hand slipping from his. The distance between them felt wider than ever before. The tears that she had been holding back for so long now threatened to spill over. She fought them, but they were there, swirling in her chest. The man she thought she knew, the man she was about to marry, was now a stranger to her. Jake, still standing by the altar, watched her intently. His eyes were full of sorrow, but there was no hesitation in his gaze. He wasn't afraid to speak the truth. "You need to listen to me, Lily," he said, his voice more serious now, as if he had been preparing for this moment his entire life. "Daniel isn't who you think he is. I know what he's hiding." Lily felt a pang of disbelief. She wanted to ignore Jake's words, to turn her back on him and the pain that was rapidly consuming her. But deep down, something told her that she couldn't. The nagging feeling in her gut wouldn't go away. She needed to know the truth. She needed to hear it from Daniel. "Jake, please," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "Why are you doing this? Why are you saying these things?" Jake's face softened. He could see the pain in her eyes, and it made his heart ache. He didn't want to destroy her world, but he couldn't stand by and watch her marry a man who wasn't who he claimed to be. "I'm sorry," he said quietly, "but you deserve to know." Lily looked back at Daniel, her eyes filled with questions, with doubt. The crowd was murmuring now, everyone exchanging glances, whispering to each other. They could feel the tension in the air. They could sense that something was about to explode. Daniel cleared his throat, trying to regain some control. "Lily," he began, his voice low and almost pleading. "Please, don't listen to him. He's just a child. He doesn't understand." But Jake wasn't backing down. "I understand more than you think," he said, his eyes burning with intensity. "I know what you did before you came here, the things you've tried to bury." Lily's heart skipped a beat. Daniel had been hiding something. She had known it in the back of her mind, but she had never dared to consider it. Now, the truth was forcing its way to the surface. "What are you talking about?" she asked, her voice trembling. "What is this secret you're hiding?" The guests leaned in, eager to hear the answer, but no one was prepared for what came next. Daniel's face contorted with fear, a look of panic flashing across his features. He stepped back, as if trying to distance himself from the question. "I'm not who you think I am," he whispered. His words were soft, almost drowned out by the noise in the room. But Lily heard them clearly. "I'm sorry, Lily, but I can't marry you. I can't do this." Lily's eyes widened. Her whole body froze. The world around her seemed to disappear. "What? What are you saying?" she asked, barely able to comprehend his words. Daniel dropped his gaze to the floor, unable to meet her eyes. The room was still, but it felt like everything was spinning out of control. "I've lied to you," he continued, his voice shaking. "I'm not the man you think I am. I've been running from my past for so long, and I thought I could outrun it, but I can't anymore." Lily's chest tightened. She could hardly breathe as she processed what he had just said. "What have you done?" she asked in a low whisper, her heart aching with the realization that everything she thought she knew about Daniel was a lie. Daniel finally looked up, his eyes full of regret. "I was involved in things I can't take back. I hurt people, and I've spent my whole life trying to escape that. But I can't keep running, Lily. Not anymore." Jake's face softened, and for a brief moment, he lowered his eyes. "I tried to warn you," he said quietly. "I didn't want this for you, Lily. I didn't want you to be in this." The crowd was still too stunned to speak. The ceremony had come to an abrupt halt, and all eyes were now on the bride and the groom. Lily was speechless. She had never imagined that something like this could happen. Everything she had built her life on, everything she thought was true, was now crumbling in front of her. Her mind was racing, trying to process the flood of emotions that overwhelmed her. Her trust had been shattered. The man she was about to marry had been living a lie. The future she had imagined now seemed impossible. "Daniel, I don't know what to say," Lily finally whispered, her voice cracking. "I don't know if I can forgive you for this. I don't know if I can marry you." Daniel's face fell, his shoulders slumping as the weight of his confession took hold of him. "I never wanted to hurt you," he said softly. "I never wanted this." The crowd held its breath, unsure of what would happen next. Would Lily leave him? Would she walk away from the life they had planned together? The silence between them seemed endless, but Lily knew one thing for sure. Her life, her future, was now in her hands, and it was up to her to decide whether or not she could ever trust Daniel again. "You said." Lily's world had tilted completely off its axis. She stood there, her heart torn between the man she had once believed she would marry and the truth that had shattered everything she had known. Daniel stood before her, his eyes filled with regret, but no amount of sorrow could erase the sting of betrayal that had pierced her soul. She could barely look at him now, her thoughts a whirlwind of disbelief, anger, and confusion. The room felt suffocating. The wedding guests were silent, their gazes shifting from Lily to Daniel, trying to understand what had just happened. The soft hum of whispers was like a distant murmur, barely reaching Lily's ears as her own emotions drowned out everything else. She felt the weight of their eyes on her, but she couldn't focus on anything but Daniel's confession. Daniel was still standing in front of her, but it was as if the man she had once known had evaporated. The words he had spoken rang in her mind. "I've been running from my past for so long. It was a past that had seemed so distant, something he had carefully kept hidden, and yet now it was right in front of her. What had he done? Her mind kept asking the same question over and over again. What kind of man was she about to marry? What kind of future had she been planning with someone who could carry such a dark secret? Lily. Daniel's voice was soft, but there was an undeniable edge of desperation in it. Please say something. I don't know what else to do, but I'm begging you to understand. I never wanted any of this. I never wanted to hurt you. Lily took a shaky breath, her chest rising and falling with the weight of the emotions threatening to consume her. She wanted to scream, to yell at him for everything he had put her through, for the lies he had told her, but she couldn't. She just felt numb. Do you really expect me to understand? She finally asked, her voice barely above a whisper. You've been lying to me this entire time, Daniel. I don't even know who you are anymore. I never wanted to lie to you, he said, his voice cracking. I just thought I could leave that life behind. I didn't think it would follow me here, but I was wrong. I was so wrong, Lily. Tears filled Lily's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had cried enough. She had trusted him with everything, her heart, her future, and now it felt like it had all been for nothing. She felt so betrayed. All the plans they had made, all the dreams she had envisioned for their life together, felt like a distant memory. Jake, who had been standing by the altar this whole time, stepped forward. His voice was low, but firm. Lily, I know this isn't easy, but you need to understand that Daniel has made choices that put him where he is now. He wasn't just running from his past. He was running from the consequences of those choices. Lily turned to Jake, her eyes red from holding back her tears. What do you mean? What exactly are you saying? She asked, feeling her heart beat faster with dread. Jake looked at Daniel for a moment before answering, his tone steady but full of truth. Before he came here, before he met you, Daniel was involved in some very dangerous things. He wasn't just living a quiet life in another town. He was tied to people, to organizations that, let's just say, they don't let go easily. And when those people find out he's made a life for himself here, Jake trailed off, the meaning clear in his eyes. Lily's breath caught in her throat. So this wasn't just a matter of running away from his past. It was a matter of survival. She felt the cold reality settle over her like a heavy blanket. Her life was no longer hers to control. Daniel's past was now a part of her reality, whether she wanted it to be or not. Lily, I never wanted you to be involved in this. I swear, I thought I could protect you. But I was wrong. Daniel's voice cracked as he reached for her, his hand trembling. Please, I love you. Don't leave me because of something I did before I met you. You're the only thing that matters to me now. Lily flinched at his touch, stepping back, feeling the distance between them grow even wider. His words were laced with genuine emotion, but they felt hollow now. How could she trust him? How could she believe anything he said after all this time? I don't know what to believe anymore, Daniel, Lily whispered, her voice filled with pain. I thought I knew you. I thought you were the man I was going to marry. But now, please, Daniel begged, his voice desperate. I'll do anything. Just don't leave me. I don't want to lose you. The room was completely still. The guests had watched the entire exchange in stunned silence, unsure of how to react to the drama unfolding before them. Some looked to each other in confusion, while others looked to Lily for a sign. The air was thick with tension. Lily's mind raced. She felt like she was drowning, like everything she had known was slipping away. How could she walk away from everything they had shared? How could she leave him when she had invested so much of her heart into this relationship? But then the weight of the truth hit her. She had to make a choice. She could stay, but at what cost? Or she could walk away. But that meant leaving behind everything she had once dreamed of. Lily stood there, her heart heavy with uncertainty. She wanted to scream, to ask for answers that she knew would never come. But one thing was clear, her life would never be the same again. She wasn't sure what would happen next, But she knew that the decision she was about to make would change everything. Lily, Daniel's voice was barely a whisper now, but it was filled with the same plea. Please, give me a chance to make things right. Lily looked at him, her heart breaking. She knew she couldn't go back to the way things were. She had already made up her mind. The future she had imagined was gone, shattered by the weight of Daniel's secrets. I'm sorry, Daniel, Lily said softly, her voice steady, though the tears burned in her eyes. But I can't do this. I can't marry you. And with those words, everything she had once known came crashing down. You said. Lily stepped back from Daniel, her feet heavy as if weighed down by the enormity of the decision she had just made. The room was still, the air thick with tension. The guests had been holding their breath, waiting for her response, and now they were staring at her with wide eyes. Some were hopeful, others were confused, but none could have understood the storm that was brewing in Lily's heart. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think straight. Her world had been turned upside down, and everything she thought she knew had evaporated in an instant. Daniel was standing there, frozen, unable to move. His expression was one of disbelief, his face pale, and his hands clenched into fists at his sides. He was trying to make sense of what had just happened, but there was no making sense of it now. I'm sorry, Daniel, Lily whispered again, her voice shaking with emotion, but there was no turning back. I just can't. I don't know who you are anymore. Daniel's eyes were wide, the pain of her rejection striking him like a physical blow. He wanted to say something, to convince her that he was the man she had fallen in love with. But the words failed him. How could he explain a life that he had tried so hard to leave behind? How could he make her understand the chaos and the danger that had followed him here? The silence between them stretched on, unbearable. Lily's heart was breaking. She had loved him. She had trusted him. But that love was now tainted by the secrets he had kept from her, by the danger that loomed over them both. She could no longer ignore the weight of what he had done, and she couldn't pretend that everything would be okay. Lily turned her back on Daniel, not out of spite, but because she needed space. She needed to breathe. She needed to process the gravity of what she was doing. The guests in the room were still silent, some whispering to each other, others just watching in stunned disbelief. They had been so sure that Lily and Daniel were meant to be, that their love was the kind of love that people would envy. But now it seemed like all of that was a lie. Lily, please, Daniel called, his voice breaking. He reached out for her, but she didn't turn around. The words he had said to her earlier, the promise that he would do anything to make things right, seemed empty now. How could he make it right when everything had already been destroyed? Lily didn't want to look back. She didn't want to see the hurt in his eyes, or the desperate look on his face. She didn't want to be swayed by the man she had once believed in. It was too late. The damage had been done. I never meant for any of this to happen, Daniel said, his voice shaky but firm. I never wanted to hurt you. You have to believe me. I love you. Lily closed her eyes for a moment, her hand pressed against her forehead as she tried to gather herself. She wanted to say something, anything to make the situation feel less like a nightmare. But there was no comforting way to put it. She could never unlearn what she had just found out. And she could never unsee the man who had lied to her for so long. The weight of his words hung in the air, but they felt hollow. The love they had once shared had become a shadow of what it had been. She had loved him with all her heart, but now she was unsure of who he really was. He had built a life, a future, on lies and secrets, and that was something she couldn't overlook. I think you need to leave, Lily said quietly, her voice breaking despite her best efforts to keep it steady. I can't do this anymore. For a moment, Daniel didn't move. He just stood there, frozen in place, as if her words hadn't fully registered. His mouth opened as though he wanted to argue, to beg her to stay, but nothing came out. He could see the pain in her eyes, the confusion, the heartbreak, and he knew that no matter what he said, It wouldn't change the reality of what had happened. Lily took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. She turned to face the room, her gaze shifting to the guests, to the people who had gathered to witness what was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of her life. Their faces were a mix of confusion and pity, but Lily didn't care about that now. She couldn't focus on them. All she could focus on was the gaping hole in her heart that had once been filled with love and trust, now replaced with the cold, unforgiving truth. As she looked at Daniel one last time, she saw the man she had once loved, but now he felt like a stranger. She saw the tears in his eyes, but she couldn't bring herself to feel sympathy. The damage was too great. The love she had for him was gone, replaced with a deep sadness that she couldn't escape. "I'm sorry, Daniel," Lily repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. "But it's over." With that, she turned away, walking slowly toward the door. She didn't look back. She couldn't. It was the hardest thing she had ever done, but it was the only thing she could do. The wedding was over, the dream was over, and she had no choice but to walk away. As Lily left the room, she could hear Daniel's voice calling her name, but she didn't stop. She couldn't stop. She needed to leave. She needed to find herself again, to rebuild the life she had lost. The guests in the room were left standing in stunned silence, unsure of what had just happened. Some had tears in their eyes, others were speechless. They had come to witness a celebration of love, but what they had witnessed instead was the painful unraveling of everything they thought they knew about Lily and Daniel. Outside, the world felt quiet. Lily stepped into the cool air, the weight of her decision heavy on her shoulders. She had made the right choice, but that didn't make it any easier. Her heart was broken, but she knew she had done the only thing she could do. It was the end of one chapter, and though the pain was overwhelming, she knew that she would eventually heal and find her way again. And for Daniel, it was the end of his story with her. The past he had tried so hard to hide would always follow him. And now, Lily had to live with the aftermath. Lily sat alone in her car, parked at the side of the road, staring out at the dimly lit streets. The cool breeze had picked up, and it seemed to whisper through the empty night. The weight of her decision was still pressing on her chest. Every second that passed felt like a heavy stone being added to her heart, and no matter how many breaths she took, she couldn't shake the tension, the sadness, the confusion. She replayed the events over and over in her head. The wedding ceremony, the vows, Daniel's confession, the young boy's chilling words, the truth about the man she had once loved, about the man she had planned to marry. She couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. The guests had all left, their murmurs of confusion and disbelief echoing in her mind. It had all happened so fast. One moment, she had been walking toward Daniel at the altar, filled with excitement and love. The next, her entire world had fallen apart. She had never imagined that a simple revelation could change everything so dramatically. She had loved him. Truly, she had. But love wasn't enough when trust was broken, when secrets were kept, and when the man she had trusted to share her life with turned out to be someone else entirely. Daniel's words echoed in her mind. "I love you, Lily. I'll do anything to make this right." But how could he make it right when he had built his entire life on lies? She had believed in him, had trusted him with everything. And yet, in one moment, all of that had crumbled into dust. But it wasn't just Daniel she had to think about now. It was the young boy, the one who had exposed Daniel's past. Who was he? Why had he been so certain about the truth? Was he an angel, sent to stop the wedding before it was too late? Or was there more to him than Lily had realized? As she sat in her car, Lily couldn't help but wonder what would happen next. How would Daniel react now? Would he try to salvage whatever was left of their relationship, or would he disappear, taking his secrets with him? Would he confront the dark past that had followed him into their lives, or would he hide from it, just as he had before? She wanted answers. But more than that, she wanted peace. She needed time to clear her head, to understand what had happened and why she had been blind to the signs. She thought about the people who had attended the wedding, the friends and family who had been so eager to celebrate her happiness. What would they think of her now? Would they understand why she had walked away? Would they question her decision? Or would they stand by her, knowing that she had done what was best for her? Lily took a deep breath, wiping away the tear that had slipped down her cheek. She could feel the sadness in her chest, but beneath that sadness was a flicker of something else, something she hadn't expected. Strength. Strength to face the future, to move forward, and to rebuild her life. She might have lost her future with Daniel, but she hadn't lost herself. She wasn't broken. She was simply beginning again. As she pulled herself together, she thought about the road ahead. She needed to focus on herself now. There was so much she still had to discover about who she was and what she wanted from life. She had been so wrapped up in the idea of love, of a perfect future, that she had forgotten about the importance of loving herself first. It was time to find that love again, the love that came from within. But even as she found this new sense of clarity, a part of her couldn't shake the feeling that Daniel wasn't finished yet. He would come back. She knew it. He wouldn't just let her go without a fight. He would call her. He would beg for another chance. But no matter how hard he tried, she couldn't let him back into her life. Not after everything that had happened. Lily's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of a knock on her window. She jumped, her heart racing, as she looked up to see a figure standing outside in the rain. It was dark, but she could make out the familiar shape of her best friend, Sarah. She had come to check on her. Lily rolled down the window, forcing a smile as she wiped away the last traces of her tears. "I knew I'd find you here," Sarah said, her voice warm and comforting. "Are you okay?" Lily shook her head, her emotions still raw. "I don't know, Sarah. I don't know what to feel anymore." Sarah opened the car door and climbed in, sitting beside her. "It's okay. Take your time. You don't have to have all the answers right now. Just breathe." For a moment, they sat in silence, the sound of the rain tapping against the car's roof, each lost in their own thoughts. Lily felt a small amount of comfort from Sarah's presence. She didn't have to explain herself. Sarah knew. She always did. Finally, Sarah spoke up again. "You made the right choice, Lily. You did what you had to do. And no matter how painful it is now, you'll be okay." Lily nodded, her tears now turning into quiet sobs. She had made the right choice, but that didn't make it any easier. "I loved him so much, Sarah. I thought he was the one. But now, I don't even know who he really is." "I know, honey," Sarah said gently, "but you'll find someone who truly deserves you. You deserve to be loved for who you are, not because of some secret someone's been hiding." Lily didn't answer right away. Instead, she let out a long sigh, the weight of the night starting to lift off her shoulders. The road ahead was uncertain, but she knew she wouldn't have to walk it alone. "I'm scared," Lily admitted quietly, her voice barely audible. "But I think I'll be okay." "You will be," Sarah said, taking her hand. "You've already shown how strong you are." With that, the two friends sat together, watching the rain pour down in the silence of the night. The days following the wedding disaster were a blur for Lily. She went through the motions, each day feeling like a repetition of the last. The shock of Daniel's betrayal still echoed in her mind, but time, as it always did, began to dull the sharp edges of the pain. Every morning she woke up, there was a small shift, a subtle feeling that things could get better, that life could still be full of surprises, even though it felt like the world had turned upside down. Lily found solace in the little things, going for walks by the lake, reading books she'd always wanted to finish, cooking meals for herself, and spending time with Sarah. The friends and family who had stood by her during the wedding, those who had witnessed the chaos unfold, reached out in their own ways, offering love and support. Some of them tried to explain Daniel's actions, but most just stood by her, letting her feel what she needed to feel without trying to fix everything. Still, there were moments when the quiet hit hardest. The loneliness that came after the storm, when the world outside continued as it always had. Daniel's name would pop into her head uninvited. Memories of their time together, laughing, planning, dreaming, came rushing back, and with them, the sting of betrayal. But Lily refused to let herself dwell too long in the past. As the weeks went by, she started picking up the pieces of her life. She was done with regrets. She knew she had made the right choice in walking away, even though her heart felt fractured. She wasn't ready to move on yet, but she was taking small steps, and that was enough for now. One afternoon, Lily sat by the window of her apartment, the rain tapping softly against the glass. She had finished a book she had been reading for weeks, and as she flipped the last page, she felt something shift within her. It was a moment of clarity. It was the first time in a long while that she had felt at peace with herself, that the heavy weight of the last few months felt like it was lifting, even if just a little. As she sat there, lost in thought, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Sarah, a simple note that read, "I have a surprise for you. Come over as soon as you can." Lily raised an eyebrow but smiled, intrigued by what Sarah had in store for her. She grabbed her jacket and headed out, her heart a little lighter than before. When she arrived at Sarah's apartment, her friend greeted her with a hug. Her face lit up with excitement. "Come on in, I've got something to show you," Sarah said, pulling her into the living room. Lily stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. And there, sitting in the middle of the coffee table, was a small box wrapped in shiny paper. It didn't look like much, but the anticipation made her pulse quicken. "What is this?" Lily asked, laughing a little. Sarah grinned. "Open it," she urged. With a mixture of curiosity and caution, Lily ripped off the wrapping paper. Inside the box was a delicate silver necklace, a simple yet elegant piece with a tiny pendant in the shape of a heart. The sight of it took her by surprise. "I know you've been through a lot lately, and you've been so strong. I wanted you to have something to remind you of that strength," Sarah explained. "This is for you, Lily, to remember that no matter what happens, you've got a heart full of love and courage." Lily's eyes softened as she took the necklace into her hands, the weight of it grounding her. It was such a small gesture, but it meant the world to her. She hugged Sarah tightly, feeling a rush of gratitude for her friend's unwavering support. "Thank you," Lily whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Sarah smiled, her eyes sparkling with warmth. "You don't need to thank me. You're strong, Lily. You've always been strong." Lily nodded, clutching the necklace to her chest. It was a symbol of the strength she had discovered in herself, even when she hadn't known it was there. She wasn't the same person who had walked down the aisle a few months ago, full of hope and dreams. She had been broken, yes, but she had also healed. And with each passing day, she was becoming stronger than ever. As they sat together, talking about everything and nothing, Lily realized that she wasn't running away from her past anymore. She had come to accept it. It had shaped her, but it wouldn't define her. She was moving forward, piece by piece, and the future still held endless possibilities. Days turned into weeks, and Lily found herself slowly but surely stepping back into the world. She returned to work, started taking on new projects, and reconnected with old friends she hadn't seen in a while. But more importantly, she began to rediscover the joy of being her own person again. She was learning to love herself first, something she hadn't fully understood until now. And as for Daniel, his calls and messages came in waves, but Lily never answered. She didn't need closure from him anymore. She didn't need him to make things right, because she had already done that for herself. The boy who had broken her heart was no longer a part of her life, and Lily was finally free. One evening, as she sat on the balcony of her apartment, looking out at the city skyline, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. The road ahead was still uncertain, but she was ready for whatever came next. She had learned that life didn't always go as planned, but that didn't mean it couldn't be beautiful. For the first time in a long while, Lily smiled to herself. She was exactly where she needed to be. The future was hers, and nothing would stop her from embracing it. You said. The following days were a blur of newfound freedom and healing. Lily moved through her life with more purpose than before. It wasn't an easy journey, and it wasn't always perfect, but she was learning how to walk without the weight of the past holding her down. One bright Saturday afternoon, as she walked through the city, Lily couldn't help but notice how different everything seemed. The same streets, the same sounds, the same rhythm of life. Yet everything felt fresh, like the world was beginning anew. Maybe it was just her. Maybe it was the way the sun shone a little brighter that day, or the way the breeze seemed to whisper through the trees, urging her to keep moving forward. She had just passed her favorite little cafe when her phone buzzed. It was Sarah, a message that simply read, "Lunch tomorrow. I've got a new idea for us." Lily smiled at the thought. It had been a while since they'd just sat and chatted without any heavy emotions hanging over them. She quickly typed back, "I'm in. Can't wait." For the first time in months, Lily felt like she was truly living. She wasn't bound by the past anymore. She had no more answers to seek from Daniel or anyone else. Her life was hers, and she had the power to shape it however she wanted. The silence that had once felt so overwhelming was now a peaceful companion, reminding her that she was okay. Better than okay, even. The next day, Lily met Sarah at their favorite spot. The cafe was warm, the scent of fresh coffee filling the air as they took their seats by the window. Sarah had a smile on her face, and Lily could tell something exciting was coming. They sat down, ordered their drinks, and after a few moments of easy conversation, Sarah leaned in. "I've been thinking," Sarah started, "about how you've been so strong through all this. And you know, you've always wanted to write. Why don't you start sharing your story? Write it all down. I know so many people could benefit from hearing it, from seeing how you've turned things around." Lily blinked, caught off guard by the suggestion. She had always loved to write, but it had always felt like a far-off dream, something she'd never have the time or courage to pursue. "I don't know," Lily began, unsure of how she felt about it. "It's such a personal thing. I don't know if I can. I don't want to drag people through everything I've gone through." Sarah shook her head gently. "Lily, what you've been through isn't just about you. Your story is powerful. It's about hope, about finding strength when it seems impossible. And it could inspire others who are stuck in their own battles. It's not about dragging anyone through your pain. It's about showing them that they don't have to give up." Lily sat back, the weight of Sarah's words sinking in. Could she do it? Could she write her story and let others see it? Would it help her heal even more? There was something about Sarah's belief in her that made Lily feel like maybe, just maybe, this was the next step. After all, if she could get through everything she had, the heartbreak, the betrayal, the confusion, she could certainly write about it. Maybe it was time to let the world see that she wasn't just a victim of her circumstances. She was a survivor. "Okay," Lily said softly, the determination starting to build inside her. "I'll give it a try." The two friends spent the rest of the afternoon talking about the possibilities, and by the time Lily left the cafe, she felt a new fire inside her. The idea of writing her story seemed less daunting now. Maybe it was the coffee, or maybe it was the warmth of her friends' belief in her, but she felt like she could conquer anything. She had already come so far. Writing the story wouldn't be just for others. It would be for her too. Back at home, Lily sat at her desk, the notebook in front of her. The pen felt heavy in her hand as she hovered over the first page. She took a deep breath and began writing. The words flowed slower than she expected, but they were real. They were raw, and for the first time in a long while, they felt like they mattered. As the pages filled, the emotions she kept locked away started to pour out. There were moments of pain, sure, but there was also a sense of triumph, of surviving when it seemed impossible, of finding the courage to stand up, not for anyone else, but for herself. Days turned into weeks, and Lily's story began to take shape. She wrote late into the night, every word a step closer to healing. The pain she once carried was now something she could see and hold, not a burden but a part of her journey. And as she wrote, she realized something. The road she had walked had been painful, but it had brought her to this moment, a moment where she was finally free. One day, after finishing another chapter, Lily paused to look out the window. The city buzzed below her, but in that moment, it was just her and the pages in front of her. She had done it. She had taken back control of her life, not by chasing after someone else's love or approval, but by learning to love herself. And as she sat there, reflecting on everything she had overcome, Lily smiled. There was still so much ahead of her. She had no idea where this new chapter would take her, but for the first time in a long while, she was excited to find out. With a heart full of hope, Lily wrote the final words of her story. I am not who I was before. I am stronger, braver, and I am ready for whatever comes next. And as she closed her notebook, the future didn't seem so scary anymore. It seemed full of possibility.